I'm really excited to introduce this next episode featuring Mo Shafeek from Mutant. Mo, as he speaks in this episode, is a tireless advocate of A to Z. And in particular, it should be noted from our side, the contributions that two key members of our team bring on a daily basis to his account. Chris Schofield, who is sales and really key ideation, contact, and Lucas Jones, who is a tireless customer support advocate and just takes care of business on a daily basis. So really, without these two folks' contributions, Mo would not be saying the kind things that he does about A to Z in this episode. Please enjoy.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Bespoken. I'm Scott Pollack, your host, and today I'm really excited and so pleased that we have a special guest in the flesh in our office. We have Mo Shafeek, who is the co-founder and creative director of Mutant.
Thank you.
And Mo has been a longtime client and advocate for A to Z, and we've really worked on some incredible projects for you over the years.
Yes, you have. I was recently just talking to someone about y'all that you are the sixth secret mutant, in a lot of ways. We started working together back when I was a creative director over at a company called Mondo. So we've been working together for about 15 years now, or 14 years. I think next year will be 15 years from our first project together, I think. My math may be wrong. But in my description of you as the sixth mutant, we're a very small company presently, that, truly all of this could not have been done without the wizardry and the kindness and graciousness and also just sort of the inherent problem-solving acumen that y'all have and your very robust and incredible team. So this is as much yours as it is ours, and it's actually really amazing to see it all laid out like this. This is so kind of trippy. You chose the most colorful and wide spectrum of things that we've done in the last couple of months. So this is very cool. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And, thank you so much for saying that we're the sixth mutant. And, but it's really, it becomes a collaborative partnership. And I feel as if you can really testify to your sort of desires and your partner's desires, and then the reality of trying to actually execute and making these projects come to life, and really how that process kind of evolves and gets taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, the pressure is entirely taking off of us, knowing that any idea I have, y'all can make happen.
Has there ever been like a crazy idea that we have not been able to try to, deliver for you?
No, we were actually just talking about the infamous Planet of the Apes chip album, which was about 10 years ago, maybe a little more than 10 years ago. We worked on at the old company. I used to work at a company called Mondo. We did the soundtrack to Planet of the Apes, and we had the idea to include a microchip that played a sound sort of similar to a greeting card when you open the gatefold. If you've ever seen the film Planet of the Apes, spoiler alert, it was Earth all along. But also, there's a scene in which you find a human baby doll in it, and one of the people picks it up, one of the characters picks it up and pulls the string, and it makes a human baby cry voice, which is sort of one of the first clues that humanity is sort of operating differently here than it was presented earlier in the film. And it's a very haunting, shrill mama sound, and we had the idea to have it so when you opened up the gatefold and made that noise, and by hook or by crook, your team figured out how to make a package that had that sort of interactive element, and it's still one of the coolest things that we got to do back at that old place. And to date, no, we've been really in this magical sort of rhythm where every single idea that I come to y'all with and have the idea for, I mean, speaking of this album right here.
Yeah. Please. And we put out these samples really for you to get very hands-on and
Thank you.
and tangible about it.
So the Inside Out 2, one of the biggest movies of last year, for a number of reasons, but also the Inside Out 1 soundtrack was iconic. We actually worked on a variation of the Inside Out 1 soundtrack previously. We did a series of 7 inches that Disney very thankfully allowed us to take some creative interpretations with their characters. I don't know if you remember this series we did, but it was 7 inches that had different tracks from across the original Inside Out soundtrack that had recreated famous album artwork. So it would be like Joni Mitchell's Blue, but it would be Sadness on the cover instead of Joni Mitchell. And they let us do Black Flag's Damaged, but with anger on the cover. And they even let us do Siamese Dream by the Smashing Pumpkins with the two lead girls from the film in it, Riley and her friend from the film. And they let us do it. But like, one of the things that I always wanted to get around to was actually putting out the Inside Out 1 soundtrack, because I loved the artwork. It was a very Art Deco, old vintage Disneyland inspired piece of artwork, where if you look at it, it's basically a series of the orbs on the cover and a lot of really nice stylistic Disneyland and Disney theme park design aesthetics to it. It was only ever made on CD. That album never came out on vinyl. And so we're working on Inside Out 2, a film that, we had been told was about sort of the blurry complexities of the blending of sort of emotions. It's not just so clear black and white. The film is full of these orbs that sort of, represent very holistic colors, but like part of the ending of the original film is learning that like happiness and sadness can be in the same emotion, right? And that this sort of blurriness of emotion sort of became an idea where I was like, I want to do that same orb cover, but I want it to be die cut, and I want it to feature sort of a mix of a hybrid of all the new colors that are being introduced into this film. And sure enough, within several weeks, I had a fully catted out die cut sample that was fully structured and functional for ours, and also with our really nice soft matte lamination.
I noticed you do a lot of soft touch on a lot of these releases.
We were talking about the things that sort of inspire us that when we go out shopping and looking at records, and I bought a lot of records from Japan over the last 5 years, and my immediate fascination came to records that had this sort of effect on them, because it's sort of a default in a lot of records I bought from there, and I just want our records to feel as special as they are, but getting this, and then the die cut reveals amazing painting by this artist named Nicole Gustafson, who has just been a huge part of our relationship to Pixar and continuing this long series that we've been doing with Pixar of alternative art. And it also plays to the themes of the original soundtrack. So I was just super enthusiastic, and I had the idea before I had the ability to articulate it. And one of the most beautiful things about working with y'all is that I was like, well, I know they can figure it out. And maybe those are famous last words, but I am just in this really privileged position that I have a partner where I can toss something like this to y'all, and you'll let me know the practicalities and the realities, but I also am never scared that I'm going to collide with something that is impenetrable or impossible.
It's also just great artwork. It's like you have this abstract essence of the die cuts, giving you an abstract image, but then once it reveals to be a tangible, distinct visual from the film or inspired by the film. And I noticed that's really a theme of a lot of the projects that you have always done, which is really finding a creative reimagining of traditional images associated with a lot of the properties that you get to work with.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, we're in a really interesting position as creatives in this space. So for those who are not familiar with what we do, we primarily work in the soundtrack space, which is a niche. Then we also sort of combine it with vinyl. It's sort of a niche of a niche, right? There are people who like films, film music, and then film music on vinyl. It's this whole other world. But as that space sort of shrinks in a lot of ways, as the film, as film in general, as film music becomes increasingly more and more specialized, the people who want to buy a film music on physical media at all, you kind of want to give them an experience that's something that is just sort of slapped together using the original key art. And I feel like we've been afforded this incredible luxury from our film studio partners, where they allow us to take creative liberties that maybe they even can't. So if you're looking at something like this Shogun record, Shogun was the very well awarded, rightfully so, album for the FX miniseries that came out last year. We asked if we could do original artwork for it, and they said, yeah. We hired a Japanese artist who is an incredible illustrator, actually, who lives here in New York, Yuko Shimizu. And, we allowed her to sort of just have fun with it, and that was the brief, was like, unfortunately, we're not going to get many episodes of this in advance. So let's just talk about what this is, what the story is, and what this means to you as an artist, and want you to interpret this thing. And, we're in such a great rhythm with the film studios that a lot of times, and within the sketch phase and beyond that, like, we get into a rhythm where they trust us, we trust them, and we are able to put together something that is wholly unique, but from an individual artist's perspective. And we get to create that canvas for them, which is such an honor. Another one of those examples is this one, The First Omen. Like, a lot of times we don't get to see the movies before they come out. And when we do, we have a very limited amount of time to figure out what this thing actually will look like when we materialize it. I saw this movie about a week before it came out, despite, trying to see it months and months in advance. And I was able to hustle with this combined with A to Z to sort of talk about the realities and the practical realities of doing die cuts and doing all this stuff and make sure this all laid out really nice. But there are two individual die cuts. There's a die cut on this cover, but also the individual sleeves of the two leads of the film that position themselves differently inside the die cut, depending on how housed it is. It's a very, very fun package that I'm so happy that, but sometimes you think about it, it's like, this was technically a Disney product, and this is so exciting that we got to play in the sandbox as creatively as we did.
It's another example, though, where you're using a slipcase and a die cut for, a somewhat abstract front initial image, but then revealing a deeper involvement with the film itself.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that partnership and that relationship with the creative sort of content holders, the studios, the video game companies, the TV studios? What is that process like? How does it work? You mentioned you just saw that film a week before you're tasked with privileged to put out that project.
Yeah. It's very interesting because every single project is different. Like, looking behind me, I can see a couple of things that we worked on, including Society of the Snow, Lisa Frankenstein, and Furiosa. And so they're all so different. Lisa Frankenstein, for example, this album came together in a way that was presented to us as we don't know what this movie is really, but we just know that the film has a lot of really great 80s music and a great score by a composer we really believe in, and we want to put something out. And when we think about that problem-solving perspective, they like coming to us in the same way that I like coming to you guys when it comes to problem-solving as well. So it is sort of this weird trickle-down effect where it is, some people have this, like, obligation has a negative connotation, but it is sort of sometimes an obligation to honor the films that they're working on in the film music space, to be like, not every film has the ability to carry the weight of a physical release, which is unfortunate. Everything should, but there's just so many movies that are made every day, right? And so in this case, it was like, this is a major studio film by Universal Pictures and Focus Features, and they wanted to help the filmmakers who really wanted vinyl produce something that deserved vinyl. And they came to us and they were like, let's talk about what this looks like. They sent us the film. We watched the film. We had some ideas. We worked with the studio with some assets that ended up not really even being, they had developed this artwork themselves, but they didn't have the sort of confidence to run with this as their key art. But they knew they wanted something that was 80s and airbrushed. And then at the end of the day, when they were like, we're actually going in a different direction for our main artwork, this thing kind of existed. And so we were like, I know how to make this look like a really cool 80s album cover. If you give us a couple assets and some time, we'll put together a piece that looks really holistic, that ties into your marketing campaign, but also feels really specialty and is therefore unique to this experience for customers and for fans, right? Separately, this movie Conclave, which is the exact same film studio, Conclave, which was a film that was nominated for Best Picture, and the score was nominated for Best Score at the Academy Awards. They sent this to us and they were like, we really want to have something out for award season. We really think the score is special and this film is really special. What can we do? And then I don't know if you've seen the film at all. Yeah. It's an amazing film, but it's not like a film that has like a single image that represents it, or it's not something that you want, the instinct, and you'll see it if you were to Google Conclave movie poster. What you do when you market those films typically is to put a bunch of the actors' heads on a cover, right? And so like this just didn't feel like this album deserved a bunch of really attractive actors' faces on it, because that's not what this score is. The score is this Academy Award winning composer's follow up to his, Academy Award winning film All Quiet on the Western Front, and this like beautiful piece of art. And they kind of get to live side by side with each other, right? And so one of the things I learned while watching the movie itself, and this is the reason why it's so important for me I like to watch these things before I make them. I had no idea what the smoke out of the chimney was. Did you ever, like, and people who were watching this, maybe you knew I just knew that when they're choosing a pope, smoke comes out of the chimney, right? And this movie is effectively about that. And so I was so fascinated by that process and how iconic it was and how symbolic it was and how special it was, but also there was so much red in the film and there was such a good color story in the film that I put together this concept, and I just knew that a nice gold foil would really, really make it pop. I don't know if you can capture this on film, but like that it would look very regal. It would look very official. And then I got to have fun with the insert. And this is like where the details get a little bit silly, but these are the things that bring me the most amount of joy. But for the insert, I put together the voting card that they normally would do. Like in the voting process, what I learned by watching the film, you sign your name and put your information on this thing, and they puncture it with a needle and thread. And so at home, I got a piece of paper and I punctured it with some thread and I scanned it and I did all this and I just fit all the credits in here or whatever. And maybe this brings no one joy, but this brings me so much joy that this is where all the credits are. Like, and again, like the liberties that are afforded to us just for the sake of something as silly as this is just, it's a symbiotic relationship in that there's trust and that there's beauty in this. And, we do collide sometimes with some ideas. Sometimes it doesn't jive. We pitch out their ideas, things that aren't always going to fly. And we have to sort of roll with the punches. So we are partners in that regard. We aren't just pushing through our thing, being like, take it or leave it. But, we send over a couple of comps and sometimes we send over one and they're just like, nailed it. And this is one of those examples where I was like, I'm thinking this. And they passed it along to the studio and the filmmaker and the director and the composer. And they were like, yeah, you nailed it. Great job.
Are the studios looking for you because this is vinyl, because as you say, it's a almost, specialty of a specialty, to come with these kind of deep Easter eggs to really appeal to the super fans of some of these films?
Not usually. There's a lot of reasons why a studio would really, really want to get something out day and date. A lot of times it's just an additional marketing beat. A lot of times it's just like, hey, Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power Season 2 is coming out. We need the soundtrack out. It's an Amazon original thing. The Amazon web store needs to have some product. Let's work together to make sure we hustle to get this thing out, but let's make it as attractive as possible. And then separately, all the creatives on the show want it to be the best possible version of all time. And then separately from that, sometimes there are people who are like, well, you can't spoil anything, so you have to keep things really vague and it has to tie into marketing, and they have a vision of what this thing is. So there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. When something has been out for enough time, it changes. Like if something has been out for over a year, a lot of times the entire attitude changes. But upon, and which a lot of this stuff is all first run release stuff, you kind of have to work within the space of like, what is this thing and what do the filmmakers think this is and what do the marketing execs think this is? Separately, do they understand what we're trying to do and can we sort of meet in the middle? And most times we do. And but then there's something like Destroy All Neighbors, which is up here, which is a friend of ours named Alex Winter, who Alex Winter famously of Bill and Ted, but also co-director of a film called Freaked, another album we worked on.
Repo Man, right?
Is Alex Winter Repo Man? I actually don't know if he's in that film, but he's been, he was in one of the Dirty Harrys. He's in one of the, but he's a great actor. And then him and this comedian, Jonah Ray Rodriguez, were starred in this creature feature, which is really, really fun, a really small thing. But like we worked with them together on so many other projects. They were like, we want you guys to do it. Can you make something fun? And they just allowed us to sort of go crazy because the movie had already been out for about a year at that point, and we didn't have to then tie into some sort of magic. We got to just go ahead and be like, this is fun. We have this artist who's going to make something really gross and, gory and fun and fluid and feels like the movie. And because it's not trying to like market the film at the same time, it gets to have its own little lifespan. And this one was fun too.
So those take on a different creative brief because the films or the properties have already come out into the world and you have a little more liberty.
Yeah, there's something off camera that I won't stand up to reach out, but there's a project called Banshees of Inisherin, which was another sort of big Best Picture play a couple of years ago. Incredible film, loved it, and we were working with the studio on that one, and the amount of sort of pitches we sent over, I sent over so many different like alternative pieces of artwork, and we ended up having to sort of work with the key art at the end of the day. I still think the thing is really beautiful and it came out really well, but like there are projects where if that project were to have come out this year, which is now like 3 years removed from when the film actually came out, I do think that we would have been able to do some of the other ideas we had, is all I'm really saying. Where it's like, oh, okay, in that instance, being that close to the film's release because they're trying to get awards consideration, they want everything to sort of line up in this nice little space. And then, you know, in that regard, we are being hired to put out the best possible version within those constraints, and that's the brief. So we operate sort of as a creative agency in some regards, where sometimes our input is valued, and sometimes it is more about just executing it as cleanly as possible within a certain parameters.
Sure. And I mean, what is that, you know, general ratio of films or properties that the studios are coming to you like, hey, we have this project, we'd love for Mutant to put this out, or you and your team sort of saying, hey, we would love to, it's the 5th anniversary, or it's, we love this film, we love this game, whatever it is, and you actually going and trying to pitch those people on your full treatment.
Yeah. I will say that these days, you know, back in the old Mondo days, it was certainly far more 50-50. We had ideas. We got a lot of genuine head scratches and looks of confusion based on the ideas we wanted to do. They're being like, even back, you know, back in the day, we were like, we want to put out Jurassic Park on vinyl. And they were like, okay, good luck with that, was the response we got from, you know, the people who controlled that. And it ended up becoming one of our best-selling records at that company. But today at Mutant, I will say that we are actually in a really privileged position where a lot of times we kind of just have a workflow with every studio, right? Where it's like we're in constant contact and we're always talking about what's coming up and what's on the horizon and what makes sense for us, what makes sense for other partners. We're not the only ones who do this. You know, there's other companies and maybe you even work with, like Waxwork Records and Enjoy the Ride Records.
You're only the best one.
But, you know, the space is small and we all really love each other. And so it's a really fun space to work in because we can't do everything, right? So it is interesting where we do partner with studios, and sometimes we find out that another partner has it and we go like, shucks, that would have been fun to do Beetlejuice, right? But also we have Conclave coming up down the pipe, and we also have Strange Darlings. So like we have our hands are full, right? In the same way that I'm sure that there are some partners out there who look and see that we got this other project and they wish they had got to work on it.
Sure.
But, you know, at the same time, you know, there are occasionally times where we see a movie and we're like, oh my God, we need to do that. And then we reach out and we have to find out who really controls it. And a lot of times it's crazy because it's never as intuitive as you think. Sometimes, despite a film being released by a studio with a big capital, you know, name on the cover of it, that movie may have been developed by a small different person. It was acquired at a film studio, but before it was acquired at the film studio, it was packaged in a thing where one of the producers actually is the one who controls the rights, and they have a friend who has a label, and that label is putting it out, and you go like, all right, we were never in the running. We were never going to be in the running to begin with. The amount of times that's happened, like you go like, oh, okay, that film was actually put together where the soundtrack was already sold. Sometimes that happens. But then sometimes you go ahead and you knock on the door and you go and say like, hey, I really loved that movie, Oppenheimer. Can we do the soundtrack for it? And they'll be like, yeah, actually, we're looking for a partner. So maybe you're the ones to do it.
I mean, in case of an Oppenheimer, though, is that film, are the rights already not secured prior, or is it something that was still in process?
They are secure in so much that the film studio knows they have the rights and they get to exploit them however they choose. But what they want to do is work with a partner they trust, knowing that it's going to, that project's going to have so many more eyes on it. And that's where we come in a lot of times, is we are a partner that can be trusted as far as known quality and also a known quantity. We also can get things into stores. And so there's a lot of different variables there that are just easy and reliable when you can just go and say like, you know what, this one's sort of a very big one and something we need to sort of make sure goes smoothly. Let's talk to, you know, the Mutant guys.
Absolutely. And I feel in that same vein, and I look at some of these releases and I notice really you have partnerships with a lot of the leading composers.
Mhm.
And I feel like just like you're saying, the studios trust you
Yeah.
to do right by the properties. I feel as if composers, a few in particular here, equally trust you to really do right by their music and their vision.
Yeah, so we are really, really lucky. I mean, over the years, we've courted the attention of studios, but like you're saying, we also have courted the attention of a lot of really incredible musicians. A couple in front of me, like Bear McCreary here, who Bear McCreary is one of the most prolific composers alive right now. Who he's done, every season of Outlander. He did Battlestar Galactica. He does the new Lord of the Rings series, Rings of Power, which I talked about earlier. But in between all that, he recorded his rock opera epic, The Singularity, which is this triple LP featuring other guest vocalists like Serge Tankian from System of a Down, Ryan Hurst and Jens Kidman and all these, and Slash, like all these different people to put together this like big epic space rock, concept album. And he told us about it before we even started Mutant. And when we started Mutant, we were just talking to him and his manager, and they were just like, would you want to help make us these records? There's like a graphic novel involved in this thing, which we didn't have anything to do with. But they were like, we already have the graphic novel coming out. We would love, and same thing, like we just want to work with someone we trust to make the best quality version of this thing that can sit side by side with this graphic novel. And so we worked with them to put out this thing, and it's amazing. It's an amazing album, and also they're about to go on tour right now. It's his first time really hitting the road, and they're taking these on the road. It's just so funny to think like, oh, this composer makes this record, and this is maybe the first time ever where this is also merch, right? This is also going to be in at someone's merch table when they're playing this rock show. The film scores are very stay at home and order it online or go to your local record store. This is like a rock album, so I'm glad that it actually is going to have the lifespan of a rock album. But yeah, so, and then similar to this, a composer we've worked with, since the days of Mondo and to this day, Michael Giacchino, composer of the original Inside Out, but also, Up, Ratatouille, Coco, the forthcoming Fantastic Four film, director of Werewolf by Night, and all these things. Lost, one of my favorite TV shows of all time, and one of my favorite pieces of film music and television music ever. We got to know him over the years, and during the pandemic, he told us that he always wanted to record an album that was exotica. I don't know if you know what exotica is. It's like a lounge style of music. It's very made popular by artists like Martin Denny, in the 50s and 60s, very tropical, inspired by tiki culture. And he always just wanted to produce an album in that sonic strata. And we produced an album with him a couple of years ago.
We even have
we made some merch he did it for the 20th anniversary of Lost. He went out to Honolulu last year and performed the music from that show, and we made some concert tees for it that also sort of tie in loosely to this project that we ended up putting together.
I wear that shirt a lot.
This is a great shirt. I also rock it too. Called Exotic Themes for the Silver Screen. Exotic Themes for the Silver Screen is a album of, I call it Bear McCreary prolific. Michael Giacchino has been doing film music for about 30 years. And in those 30 years, he's done something like 40 or 50 films and television and video games. And what he did was he went into a studio and he recorded one major theme from every single thing he's ever worked on. And I'm talking every Marvel film, every Disney film, every science fiction film, every Planet of the Apes, every episode, every TV show like Lost or Alias, things that he worked on in this lounge exotica style. And we have been slowly releasing them. We released volume 1 last year, and we're releasing volume 2 this year. And it is just this thing where, like, I don't know, when I was 20 years ago, when I was watching Lost live, crying when I heard his music during these real epic scenes, I never thought in a million years that I would be working with him. And it is just, this super surreal part of our job that, yes, it's surreal that we got to work on Inside Out too, but even weirder to me is that we get to call these people some of our friends and partners. And, composer Andrea Datzman, who did Inside Out 2, was a dear friend now. And, we talk all the time. And when working on this project, it was her first vinyl album. And she provided liner notes for it, and we talked at length about what that should be because she wanted it to be perfect, and it was so important to her. And I just remember just being like in this process where I was like, oh, this is so weird that I'm like so close with some of these people where we get to just have these organic conversations about like what should this be. It's her first album, not her first album that she ever made, but first physical album that she wanted to be really special, and I'd like to think that we helped make that happen. And so one of the joys of my life is that, you know, we get to realize these visions, make things that people are proud of and proud to actually have in their record collections, not only just customers, but also the people who are associated with the project themselves, the creators of these things, and that we become the people that they think of next when they're for their next projects.
Absolutely. I mean, do you feel likewise that there's an appreciation by the public for composed music at this point for film scores?
I think so. There's a number of like, you know, cream of the crop famous names. Like you think about like, I would say the average civilian knows John Williams. John Williams has written some of the most popular songs in American history, but also Hans Zimmer can sell out a arena and play his theme from Pirates of the Caribbean to a sold out audience, you know, and it's epic and it's so cool. Most of the artists in this sector are a little bit more specialized, and I think that's cool too. You know, I think that it's a mix of both things, right? Where there is a love and an appreciation of film music from a lot of people. People know it when they hear it, and there was like a little bit of that last year when Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross did their score for Challengers, which was just this incredible piece of film music that was unfortunately unrecognized by the Academy last year. But I would argue that album is probably one of the best albums of last year. And I would argue that most people who really know music would tell you the exact same thing. And that is so cool that a piece of film music can be in that conversation. And, you know, we worked on the soundtrack to Dune 2 last year as well. And that was in the conversation as well of being this really iconic piece of film music that rised above and elevated and got into this stratosphere of being more than just a film score. And, you know, we're working on several projects this year that we hope do the same thing. But
as an overall listening experience, it's just for the music's sake.
Exactly. I mean, look, that's part of the reason, like what you have in front of us is sort of a specifically on the mutant side of things is a little bit of everything we learned over the years, right? There was definitely a version of this where we were creating things for completionists. There's a lot of film score enthusiasts who are completionists, and I love that. People who want every single piece of recorded music or cue that is affiliated with the film, especially the John Williams stuff, especially the Zimmer stuff. You go into it, you can find like a 3 CD set for E.T. where it is every alt, every unused take, every cue that was only played for half a second but was not incorporated into a suite later down the line. Like you can find these things. We worked on a Batman film score, Danny Elfman's Batman, 1989, where the person who helped us produce the actual audio component of it, this incredibly talented person named Neil Bulk, he was like, oh my God, you guys will be the first people to have this highly in demand sting that has not been on any of the physical releases ever, or even any digital releases either. And it is just a 3-second string swipe that happens when like the Joker appears from, you know, in one on camera for like 1 second or whatever, 3 seconds in the film. And there's that level of completionist where people are just like, I want every single thing that has been represented in that film. Separately, there is what is the best listening experience, right? This Shogun album, the recorded music for Shogun would have been like a 6 LP if we ended up putting it all out. But at the end of the day, what we wanted to put out was something that was, you saw the show, you liked the music. The theme song is iconic. There's so much incredible music. It's Trent Reznor's partner Atticus Ross and his brother Leopold Ross and Nick Chuba putting together this amazing piece of film music, but we want it to be accessible as well. We don't want the sticker shock or the price to be this thing that it disables someone from wanting to actually consider purchasing this thing and doing what it deserves to be done, which is to be played on your stereo and to listen to while you're doing your activities, or even just listening to it, vibing out and having a cocktail, you know? I mean, yes, there are triple LP rock operas like this, which are just meant to be sort of blasted at the full height of volume in stereo. And there's whatever the official album release cycle of, which is Inside Out 2, which is the music that was released when it was released digitally, but also from the film. But separately, we strongly typically advocate for a version of an album that is accessible to everyone. Destroy All Neighbors was an album that was a much longer album, but we felt that like if someone's going to buy this album, we want them to have a version that plays the best for you as a listening experience, and not like every single cue from the film. There was something like 80 something cues in the movie, and they were like, let's put it all in. And I was like, that's going to be like almost 3 LPs. We should probably talk about what a customer would want out of this experience, because that stuff lives on Spotify, but this is a different experience. And we think about that a lot. We think about being like, well, yeah, this is different than what's available elsewhere. We want to put out together a thing that is both collectible, but also special, and actually interacts with you as a listener in a way that it deserves to be.
Absolutely. And can you talk, switching gears a little bit, about the origins of Mutant?
Sure.
It was a new company that you and several partners started. And was there really an intent to be different and to do new sorts of projects when you started the company?
Yeah. I don't try to talk too much about our relationship with our former company, mostly because we have no issues with them, and we left on our own accord. And so it is interesting to talk about like what we hope to achieve at this new place that is different from what we had achieved there already. But really, it's about relationships and partnerships and being able to be a creative outlet for a lot of people who need an additional set of hands and a partner in a lot of these types of projects. So many of these projects come from I had an idea, we should do this. And there was a couple of things that we worked on at the last place that never happened because they were always just, someone had an idea, let's do this. And almost all of those ideas that didn't happen there, that we just didn't figure out, or we couldn't figure out, still haven't happened. And I guess the ethos and maybe the mentality I had going into starting Mutant with my friends, Eric Garza, Mitch Putnam, Spencer Hickman, and Jenny Jacoby, the other 4 mutants, A to Z being the 6th, but was, if we don't make it, no one else will. I know that goes contrary to the idea of what we were talking about other labels existing, but that's this space. But there are so many things that truly will never be released unless me and Spencer and Jenny and Mitch and Eric make it ourselves, And that's a interesting sort of position to be in, where it is like, when we left our former jobs and we decided we were going to start something else, it was a mix of, well, we're good at this, we should keep doing it. But also, if we stop doing it, then maybe no one will do it. Mm-hmm. And that is a fascinating sociological experiment. It doesn't put too much of an ego on it. It is more just a casual idea that like the amount of work that a lot of these things take, and the amount of relationships these things take, and a lot of the actual bandwidth and financial capital and all this stuff to like sort of make someone, like when Alex Winter emails you being like, I want to put out the soundtrack to Destroy All Neighbors, if like we don't take that seriously, then it may never actually come out. Because some projects, and we've known this because we've worked together for so long, would just sit and idle. There's a project on your wall right there for That Thing You Do. I've talked about
hidden behind Ray Charles.
Yes. What we, I've talked about this in other interviews, but like when I started on That Thing You Do, it took 5 years from my very first email to the minute I was allowed to go into production from it. And it was an active 5 years. It wasn't just a passive, like no one responded for the first 3 years and then we started working on it. And you'd think that is a soundtrack that's already been out. There's no additional material on that. It is just a straight reissue, but for the first time on vinyl. But the amount of steps that were required to get that over the finish line. And I'm not saying I'm the only person who could have ever done it, but I do think that if I didn't get that out, I don't know that it ever would have.
You had the persistence to follow it through.
Yes, there was a moment in time, and this is not an exaggeration, that I was on vacation in Hawaii, and I had not heard from the team that would have had approvals on That Thing You Do for almost 4 to 5 months. And we had been emailing and being told, we'll get back to you. I landed in Hawaii, and I got a phone call as I was grabbing my baggage. And it was someone being like, hey, this is so-and-so who's ready to talk about That Thing You Do. And I was like, oh my God. And they're like, where are you? And they asked me, and I was like, oh, I'm at an airport right now, picking my baggage. And they're like, oh my God, so sorry. You know what? Just how about we just we'll call you back tomorrow? And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. I did not hear back from them for 4 more months. And so it is stories like that where it is like, and I mean that all politely, it came out really great and they were the loveliest people. But it is just like, sometimes when you're making these things, it is such a low priority and such a low sort of, you have to be the driving force. And so with Mutant in particular, to bring it back to sort of what it is our mission statement is, if there is one, it's not only just making cool stuff, and that physical media is really important and still and continues to be important. And like with every single release, making sure that it is so obvious that physical media is important, that you cannot just put something out and just be kind of casual or haphazard about it, but justify its existence, because when you have it, you need to go, wow, this is so special looking. But even beyond that, it is that as the space shrinks and shrinks and shrinks, it is so important to know that like there are people out there who are just trying. If you was like, oh, I wonder why that never came out, it's because someone is still currently trying, or someone gave up, or there's no one in the position to actually make it happen, because it does require people. And we're about to enter this weird space of AI and all this stuff that's around the corner, and like people are worried about it, what it means for taking jobs away from people. But like really nothing gets done without people actually with visions and actual imperative and gumption and behind the scenes actually driving to make these things happen. And so dedication is really what the part of this is that we are dedicated to the cause of keeping film music and physical media together, and also making just cool shit.
Well, you make lots of cool shit. I mean, I wanted you to actually even maybe delve a little bit into some of the imagery and the merch that is behind the Mutant name. And I mean, I was just wondering, as a random question, this image, this logo here. Yeah, I was wondering, is it a character? Is there a whole backstory?
You know, it's so funny. We were talking about what Mutant is and like where he came from and all these things. But this is our guy. His name is Maxwell. Oh, smile with all 3 cameras. He's we have a backstory for him. It's very silly, but we worked with this amazing logo designer named Corey, who is who also helped design our part of our partner Spectre Vision, their logo as well. And we were just talking about like what we should be called. And the brainstorming session was so long and so rigorous. And when we arrived at Mutant, we were like, that's pretty fun. We kind of wanted something that felt a little bit like 90s skate aesthetic. Well, because we felt like we kind of had that energy a little bit, where it's like, a little punk rock, a little cool. We're indie. We're coming from a world of corporate stuff and trying to keep it alive and indie and strange. And then Corey sent us this little guy, and we fell in love, and that's when we knew we were Mutant. When we saw this guy, so
it immediately
clicked. Every single person who was maybe on the fence about the name or didn't really know what that meant and how that fully lined up with us, the second they met Maxwell, they all knew he's a lifer. We are all lifers. I was actually just talking to your wife about tattoos, and that just reminds me I need to get him tattooed on me. I love this guy so much. But and then in the same thing, this nice little handwritten font that we have to go along with it. We also just love physical media. The Mutant, typeface has this fun little delta, this triangle in the center for the A. And we decided to keep that going with the words physical media, something that we really stand for. And
us too. I've so many times wear these hats, and I'm like, shit, we should have come up with this physical media. You guys beat us to it.
No, I mean, we're all in this together. Literally, like that could be your mantra too. We there's no trademark symbol on that, no registered symbol.
Okay, I'll keep you to that.
Yeah. No, seriously, like the more people who are out there just championing that it is important that we talk about the need for it. I was just talking to my wife literally on my way here about how the other day we're going to a gallery show tonight on Rivington Street, and one of my favorite bands, a band that I used to work with called I Am the Avalanche from Brooklyn, they had a song called Summertime Rivington Vibe. That's a B-side off their first album that I had at one point on my iTunes. And, several computers later, I was like, I don't have it anymore. Where is it? It must be on a hard drive somewhere. And I was like, surely it's online. Googled it, cannot find it. And I'm just like, if I don't have that on a burned CD somewhere, I'm going to riot, because this is where I've officially become sort of a 1 foot in, 1 foot out of 2 different generations, where it's like, I am so proud of the physical media I make, but I also recognize if it isn't on some form of physical media, you don't know if it's ever going to go away anymore. So people of Earth, but if you love an album, get a physical version of it. There is always a chance it will disappear from your life, and there will be no way for you to listen to it unless you own it. And seriously, do not take that for granted.
Absolutely, but the film industry is similar, where so many films are not available on any of the streaming services.
Oh my God!
How many films are only available on some lost copy of a DVD or a VHS?
I'm going to give you an example that is so insane that'll blow your mind. Do you remember the movie Spice World?
Yeah,
the Spice Girls movie.
I do.
Famous enough, whether you like the movie or not. Massive movie starring the most famous musicians of 1997, right? Like 95 through 97, I should say. But like they put out a movie, a surreal little cult hit that people love. That movie is not available to watch anywhere in the world if you do not have it on VHS or DVD from its original print.
Is that because the Spice Girls don't want it out, or what's
I have no idea. But if you think about that, it is so strange that a movie that as famous and iconic as that to an entire generation of people, if you don't own it on a physical media, you cannot watch it. And so just take that, do not take it for granted. Literally, your favorite movie, your favorite album may someday disappear. If you love something, buy a copy.
Yeah, I mean, we think there's a real gap, frankly, in the market for a company that basically retraces the steps to put out classic cult films and do the mutant treatment for them, you know? But it seems like everyone's embracing streaming, but yet so many films are not available on these platforms.
I mean, I'm not an evangelist. I don't think that, I'm not one of those people who's like, Netflix is bad. You know, it's like that is not what I'm preaching at all. I think it's important. I think more people watch movies because of Netflix these days than any other platform, right? But yes, on the same token, if something disappears from Netflix, you may never see it ever again. So it is interesting to be in a position where if you like, you know, Glass Onion, the sequel to Knives Out, right, which was only made available to date on Netflix, it's like, if they decide for some reason that doesn't need to exist anymore, there's no Blu-ray copy of that. Where does that live? That never came out in theaters. There's no VHS copy that you can go into a thrift store and find. You know, that exists on their platform. They paid for it. It's their right. But it is something where it's like someone should start figuring out a way to have a long-term plan with them to make sure there are physical versions of those things, because rights change, things get messy, complications happen. Maybe the Spice Girls are blocking it from happening. I don't know.
Who knows?
I don't think the Spice Girls can stop Glass Onion from coming out, but who knows? Maybe they're really a powerful force still to this day, the Beckhams, you know? I don't know.
Absolutely. And can you talk about some of the other products that we may not be involved in, but really are core to Mutant? Posters, toys, and other branded sort of apparel, and really your ideas behind furthering those formats and catering to fans of certainly poster art.
Yeah. Well, you know, we operate as a creative services agency. So we work in any format that is demanded. A lot of it does work around 2D art. You know, we still work very much with illustrators and other creatives to put together their interpretations of things. You know, if you like the movie Dune 2, or, you know, like we've done a couple of screen printed posters that are very limited edition and fine art and out there for people who love that. And, you know, we've done that for a number of films, a lot of films from the studio IFC and Shudder, a lot of independent horror films and things like that, where we get hired to help produce some key art for it. And it's really cool. So we do limited edition screen prints of it, but also some just artwork for digital use for people who just want to have alternative artwork for their studios and other purposes. But yeah, I mean, where we come from, where this whole entire thing is spawned from, is from the gig poster scene in a lot of ways. You know, this whole sort of scene is started by my mentor and Mondo's co-founder, Rob Jones, who does all the creative direction for Third Man Records. He does designs the records, and he's won a Grammy doing stuff for the White Stripes and Jack White and all this stuff. And so an incredible inspiration, and someone who had the harebrained idea of making alternative art for movies and taking the gig poster philosophy of this idea of you're going to see a screening, a specialty screening. What if you got a gig poster for that? And that is what gave birth to the Mondo music department and what ultimately has sort of trickled down into what we do here. And so I would be remiss to not mention that. But the reason I bring that all up is because now we kind of work in this very, very sort of fungible space where it is like, if we watch something and there's something that is ephemeral from the property, the film, the franchise, we want to make it happen for people. You know, there is just this like, there's just no reason not to, especially in the world of merchandise and collectability. Like a lot of times it's just like, I want to make stuff that I would buy if I was a film fan, right? And I am a film fan, so it's perfect. I get to make things, right? Like we're just working on some stuff for the TV show Severance right now, which is, you know, about to end its second, literally the finale is tonight of the second season. And I've seen it and I know how it ends, and we have ideas about what we're going to do and things we're going to make for it. And we're working on that project. And it's fun to be able to watch something and take some notes and be like, it would be really cool if we got to make that, and then pitch it and then find out if we can. And so that's everything from posters to collectibles to toys to statues to Christmas ornaments, 3D stuff, 2D stuff. If we have the vision for it, we try to make it happen. It's just about making physical objects for fans who just want something that feels, you know, we're all adult collectors at a certain point, right? Like, you know, some people still collect toys, some people collect records, some people collect books, some people collect posters, but like at the end of the day, there's something for everyone out there that we'd like to make for them, right? Where it's like, I'm a fan of this thing, you know, there's not going to be a lot of merchandise made for Conclave. And so, you know, even though it was nominated for Best Picture.
You're not going to make the smoke canister?
I thought about it, but at the same, yeah, maybe some incense, you know, whatever. But, you know, it's like, if you love that movie, there's no way to exhibit your love of that. Other than maybe getting a piece of physical media from us. And so what we'd like to do is just have the idea of like, if we see something and we're like, yeah, we're working on the music version of it, but also, is it possible to make something that is a little bit more three-dimensional, something that is out there for people who, even if they buy it, maybe we can include it in the record that feels a little more tangible, that you can have as a fun little collectible for this thing, because this may be the only piece of merchandise for your favorite thing. Again, I talked about this being merch now at a merch booth, but that's kind of how I feel. I'm also a big music fan, and I go to concerts, and my wife will tell you, the first place I go is the merch booth, and she rolls her eyes at me, but like, I've just always been obsessed with cool merch, and souvenirs, you know, it's like, you love something, you want a souvenir, and it's like, sometimes the only souvenir you can get is the home video, Blu-ray, 4K, the soundtrack, or a poster. And so we try to traffic in those primarily. However, whenever we have any idea, we try to manifest it.
Is there any merch that you say you go to gigs, or is there any merch you've seen? Like, not that you guys maybe did, but you're like, wow, this is really next level, super cool. Anything like, you're like, God, I wish I had done that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm still old fashioned and I love really good apparel. I think that like one of the things that like I don't have the three-dimensional brain to figure out is the idea of making custom apparel. You know, I'm so old fashioned where I'm like, yeah, put it on a t-shirt. That's all you can ever do. And then you go to see that one band who has that fun little like bifurcated multicolor block custom piece with a different band and a sewn in tag. And it's like $70, but it looks like it costs like $100. And you're just sort of like, how do they pull that off? And it's like foresight. And they know that you can actually make anything you want if you just try hard enough and know where to do it and have those. I don't have that brain for apparel. Thankfully, I have that brain for music thanks to you guys, because I know what we could do together. And I was just sitting here before we started recording, you know, admiring the integrated tech solutions Aesop Rock record, where you were asking like, surely you would have, you know, had that idea at some point. And I was like, no, you know, like I look at the Plum record, the Crushed Velvet thing, you know, like the flocking, you know, like there are so many things where like I continue to see things. And again, this comes back to what you were saying about the soft touch, where it's like, sometimes you can only make the things that you've seen in the world and sort of put these things together. And I guess we are sort of a hybrid of all of our influences. And I do like to think that, you know, I was influenced equally in equal parts by my trips to Japan and my mentorship by Rob Jones, and also my weird obsession with Josie and the Pussycats, the movie from 2001, and the Spice World movie, but also that I love, you know, gory horror movies like Hellraiser, and all that stuff comes together as just like this weird, you know, I love Drew Struzan poster art, and I also love Hans Zimmer music. And, you know, we just try to create all the things that we as fans have sort of put into our minds. And, manifest and create and be inspired. I try to be inspired when I go to merch tables.
Absolutely. That's why I asked. So really,
Yeah.
Mutant is essentially a mutation of all of your loves and interests, and it coalesces into these various products.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for really the insight and sharing the stories behind a lot of the releases. And, we don't necessarily know the backstory that goes into you chasing these releases for years and the relationships with the composers. But certainly from our end, we just want to do right by you, and we want to do right by the properties, the composers, and all of the people working behind the scenes. And we know with a lot of these films and shows, it's years and years and years and lots of money and lots of hopes that manifests itself in a few of these physical, tangible products.
We're the last step in the process for a lot of these things. When they've worked on these things for solo studios, filmmakers, film composers, they work on these things for years, and then this is their exit gift at the end of the day a lot of times. And so we take it very seriously. It's very important. I've been in multiple dinners and bar situations with people who are just sort of like, it's crazy how many people who in this industry have our stuff that you would never think would ever have been paying attention. And it's really flattering. And it's just crazy to have had any impact on people who have had impact on us in so many ways, where it's like, there are filmmakers that I love who know the things that I make because I made them well. And part of that has to do with you guys. You guys help us make these things, and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.